When I was 13, my parents told me something about myself that changed my life. Have you learned something about yourself that changed the way you perceive yourself? When I was 3 months old, my twin brother was diagnosed with a terminal lung condition. I was diagnosed with a terminal heart condition. My brother was very weak and the decision to pull the plug was obviously a hard decision. His heart was taken and given to me within 10 minutes of his passing. I was 3 months over how long I was expected to live at this point. My parents couldn't take it and put me into care. They came back into the picture when I was 10. I found out what happened when I was 18. 2 years later and my stomach still drops every time I think about it. Hug. I used to always complain that I wanted a brother. I am an only child and I used to love the idea of a sibling. So one day my mother told me I was supposed to be a twin but my brother didn't make it. It kind of shattered me, but it got me to shut up about it. When I was 15ish, I was evaluated by my school for educational impairment since I never got good grades or had any interest in classes. Their target diagnosis was supposed to be ADD or ADHD, as that was the up and coming thing at the time. One of the counselors made a remark during their review that has recently haunted me since my mid-20s. She said, "Noctum will most likely never be married." I have no idea what this was based off of, but here I am. 33 years old, single, been through multiple failed relationships, and no prospects for the future. It kinda burns. As a psychologist, let me just say that 50% of my colleagues don't know what the FCK they're saying in 90% of the time. Don't let a single out of proportion brain fart define you. My mom was planning to commit suicide before she found out she was pregnant with me. It's a really heavy thing to think about considering how much of an butthole I was to her my whole childhood. I was told I spoke funny. I grew up knowing I was kind of deaf, but I'd never thought it affected my speech or that I talk like a typical deaf person. Then some butthole pointed it out in grade school. I listened to some recordings, and yep, it sounds funny and I'm super conscious of it now. Clarification: I have about 40% of my hearing. What with all the accents and dialects that exist, everyone sounds weird to someone. Don't let that butthole get you down. My mother divorced my father when I was about 1.5 years old. My mom was always very vague as to why they split up, saying no. Sometimes people just fall out of love, or I was young and impulsive, and it just didn't work out. It was a huge cause for all of my anger when I was a kid and teenager, even after having been adopted by her second husband, who was the best father I could have ever asked for. In my late teens, I had a problem with destructive behavior and anger addiction issues. In my 20s, I developed deep alcohol and drug, MDMA, and script painkillers problems. When I was 27, my younger sister told me that she and my mom got wine drunk together one night, and she confided in her that the reason she left my dad and moved out of state was because he was a massive alcoholic, abusive, with drug problems. The final straw was when she came home from work, and he had set a small fire in the house that escalated, and he was outside drinking with his buddies. While I was in my playpen at home, she literally had to run into a burning house and rescue her infant son while he was too drunk to stand. Suddenly all the alcohol and drugs and anger makes a lot more sense, and why she was so overprotective of me and critical when I made poor decisions. I actually teared up at this. I have a 6-month-old son whose biological father is a drug addict and a complete butthole, not being raised by him. My son has the most amazing daddy who has been my best friend for 8 years. We're getting married in December. I am so terrified of my son, this little innocent baby boy growing up and using drugs. So this post really hit home. After a parent-teacher conference in the 6th grade, my dad told me that my teacher was worried that I would just charm my way through life. I asked my dad, "Is that bad?" Now that's a charming way to get out of trouble. When I was pretty little, maybe 6 or 7, my mom told me I was B. She explained to me what that was, and it took me 3 or 4 years to realize I am in fact not B. There's something wrong with your mom. I was a very depressed child. I felt alone and never talked to anyone about my problems because I felt no one cared. Recently on Mother's Day, age 27, we went out for a family meal and were talking about our childhoods. I am dyslexic and I had a psychologist evaluate it at around the age 11, so I could get appropriate help at school. My mum quoted the psych as saying he had never met a child with a lower sense of self-worth. This floored me. I never knew anyone even noticed I was upset, let alone cared. She went on to say how she wanted to move me to a different school to new friends to see if it would make me happier, and tried to get me into sports clubs and music. Lots of different things I never knew they tried. Obviously I didn't share this, since sharing is something we as a family have a lot of trouble with. Maybe tell her, next time you and I have a moment alone, that you were both glad and moved to hear what she said the other day, that you didn't think anybody saw it and that you are glad they didn't try their best. She would appreciate it and it don't need to be a long and emotional conversation. Just tell her without added drama. My mother has had 6 kids in her lifetime, and only 3 have survived. My older brother, my twin sister and I. She lost 2 of her daughters in a train accident in the 1970s when she was only 19. She still has scars on each shoulder from the impact of her daughter's bodies slamming against her when the train tore through the truck. She underwent extensive plastic surgery to get her face back. The doctors had to use a photograph just to put her face back together. Just knowing that my mother watched 2 of her children die and the fact she has a physical reminder is crazy. She's such a strong woman for getting through it all and still smiling. When I was 17, one of my friends told me I can be a little mean. From that point I realized a lot of my jokes were at someone else's expense. I am in butthole. When I was 17 I found out that my grandpa was not my dad's biological dad, thus not my actual grandpa. My grandma was abused by my biological grandpa. She feared he would try to kill her if she left him. Then she got pregnant and wanted better for her child, my dad. She met my grandpa soon after. They got married a few months later. When my dad was born he adopted him. My mom told me, and no one but her knows I know. My grandma and grandpa later had a child of their own. He had absolutely no bias against my brother and I and my cousins, who actually had relation to him. Same goes for the treatment of my dad and aunt. It did not change my perception of myself, but it deeply affected me. I already thought of my grandpa as a good man, but after finding out it brought my respect of him to a new level. He is the greatest man I know and I want to be as great of a man he is. Nobody but my mum, she told me, knows that I know. Not only was I an accident, but in a spout of severe postpartum depression. My mother kidnapped me and tried to kill me as a baby. Dang. When I was about 10 years old or so I had an infected spot on the shin of my right leg. It was an open spot in the skin and was getting larger. I showed my mom and we went to the doctor. I was given an antibiotic shot every day for a week or so. No oral antibiotics then, at least not for that particular one. When I was about 30 or so my mom mentioned that the doctor told her it was gangrene and if the antibiotics hadn't worked I would have had to have the leg amputated. This was back in the late 50s. Not me, but I found out my boyfriend was born without a butthole, and the doctors, quite literally, ripped him a new one. At the age of 20 learned that myself and my twin brother were initially 2 of 21 embryos, which naturally died down to 6 fetuses, and then 4. All 4 of us could have survived, but to increase mine and my brother's chances my mother was advised to have 2 of the fetuses aborted, via a large direct injection through the belly. Was a mini existential crisis knowing that firstly, being IVF, I naturally wouldn't be alive and then also wondering the what ifs of being a quad, or being one to get aborted. Hello fetuses, I would like to play a game. When I was in 6th grade, my father was on his way to prison for 2.5 years. The day that he was going to be put away, he informed me that I had a younger brother, who he had with another woman whilst with my mother. In the years that followed, I learned so much more that would change my view of my family, but this single moment is what I can attribute to my warped view of us. When I was 2, I had to go to the hospital for an ear infection. The doctors did their stuff and left me in the room, and I just toddled out of the room, down the hall, and heard a lady crying in the next room. Her daughter was in the bed, asleep. and the mom was crying. I was too. So I put a lollipop in the girl's hand because of 2-year-old logic. Later, the lady came back to thank my mom because apparently I had woken the girl from a coma. I don't know how. I don't even remember it. I was told all of this when I was 10. Whoa. My mom had a miscarriage in between my brother and I, and multiple doctors told my mom to abort me because they thought I would be mentally retarded. Made me very aware of how lucky I am to not only be alive, but to be fully functioning. I don't understand your post. All you typed was I choked for a long time as a newborn baby when someone tried to feed me French fries. When they got me taken care of in the hospital, the doctors said I would probably never wake up, and if I did I would be a vegetable. So the doc told my parents they should pull the plug. Apparently just mere seconds after he said this they could hear me crying. I've heard a lot of other stories over the years about doctors saying you're fricked to someone, only for them to beat whatever ailed them. So if you're in that situation, just fight it the best you can. Mom had 3 miscarriages before me. Kinda just struck me as being lucky, I guess. Never really thought about it until I realized that I had a very little chance of being a success too. Not necessarily true. If 15% of pregnancies end in miscarriages, the odds of someone having 3 consecutive miscarriages might well be about the same as flipping 10 heads. Yeah, I hate you. Math checking novelty accounts. My mom told me that I have nystagmus in my eyes, involuntary eye movements, when I was like 14 or 15. I had always wondered why people would look at my eyes funny if we'd been talking for a while, because it was more noticeable when I was little. I was not happy to know that she kept that from me. It made me look people in the eye far less, which only contributed to my shyness and low self-esteem. Nowadays, I'm still working to get past those issues, but I forget I have the eye condition on most days. Learning that me and my brother were some of the few people in the world that have keratosis pilaris follicularis decalvans. It's a skin disease. My brother basically doesn't have hair grow in some places, his head, parts on his arm, back. I have the cousin which is also kinda rare. I have it on my cheeks and arms. I've never met anyone else in the world that has what me and my brother have. It's kinda sad because it's always red and always there. I have KP, but I didn't know there was KPF. KP itself is very common but often only gets diagnosed in extreme cases. I have it on my legs, arms, chest and hips. Added to is I have very sensitive skin, so if I use any smelly it can get very agitated. I have a disease in my ear that means that my bones and eardrums disintegrate. When I was young, my parents forced me into having an eardrum graft. I learned a few years later that due to all the complications I have with my ears, having no eardrum could easily kill me. So thankful to them. My mom told me when I was like 7 or 8. I went to speak to your teacher. You have very good grades, but be warned. I don't care if you ever get a low grade. I know you're quite smart. So you'll never have me screaming at any teacher, nor will your father ever defend you if you score low or don't make your homework. You are responsible for using what you have to keep yourself going. Now go eat pasta. So while everyone had their parents help them and scream at teachers sometimes, I kinda just did what I was asked and realized the general population are somewhat dull towards education and the advantages it brings. Also, I love pasta. When I was 15, I began to have the symptoms of too much fluid in the skull, crushing my brain, which I was diagnosed with at 17. The disease gives me a headache all the time, and the pain makes me tired and makes it hard to concentrate. I also get some visual problems and I have some minor brain damage which has affected my motor skills and memory. Anyway, the point is that at 15 I was really successful at school, totally coasting through everything with absolutely no effort. Suddenly, I have this pain fatigue disease to deal with, and the first time in my life I actually have to work to learn things and get homework done. My attendance at school in my GCSE year was less than 50% because I was so ill. So I couldn't just crap out some answers to homework during lunch anymore. My memory was shot, so I actually had to learn things by actually going over and over them and trying. It was a huge massive shock to me and I was devastated that I wasn't clever anymore. But this experience totally changed everything. By learning to learn and put effort into my education at 15, I struggled through and did my A-levels. Then I struggled through and did my degree. And now I'm struggling through a second degree and a professional qualification. I know myself, and there's absolutely no way I'd have got this far if I'd never been sick. I would have found it all way too much effort and I'd have quit. I'm so grateful to my disease for making me learn how to work hard at something important to me. For most of my life I had been told by my mother that I had Asperger's, epilepsy, allergies, asthma, autism and a slew of mental disorders or diseases she'd seemingly picked out at random. Found out last year I'm pretty darn healthy and none of it was true. My only gripe? I could have played dodgeball. I really wanted to when I was younger but couldn't because of all of these. Also, I am now trapped in a well. I knew we had relatives that were in the mafia. Recently I found out that relatives closer to myself than previously known did work for them. Nothing to make the papers. Some fence work. This really didn't change how I perceive myself as much as how I viewed my family's history. For those, like me, not in the know, Google implies that fence work means dealing in stolen goods. When I got to university, I found out that with a nice haircut, I was actually good looking. It completely changed the way I presented myself and talked to girls. I learned, after my mom had had a 1 stroke to a glass of wine too much, that I was an accident. She had a 5-month-old and was relying on breastfeeding for birth control. Apparently, my dad said no when he was told I was on the way. Not a good feeling. A lot of pregnancies are accidents. Now, if she had called you a mistake, that's a different kettle of fish altogether. Very few pregnancies are actually carefully planned and fully wanted at first. Stop taking it personally. My mom was always sick when I was a child. We stopped going out much or sometimes we couldn't go out because her tummy hurt. So, I would spend hours playing my mom's feet keeping her company completely unaware she was unable to move due to cancer and recovering from surgeries. Little did I realize until I thought deeply about it as a teen that my mother had ovarian cancer and had a hysterectomy. I asked my dad and I stayed home with my mom while she recovered so my dad could work it up on our house payments. They just didn't tell me the truth because I was under 9, shy, anxious, and had a speech issue. School life was hard enough. Because of this I'm much more understanding and patient with friends who get severely ill. Sometimes people stop visiting if you get too sick. Not me. I'll always stop by. A friendly face helps. As a kid my mom told me I'm a 7th level mature soul, which is supposed to mean I reap good karma, except on Reddit. Ever since then, I have believed that I am more or less the chosen one. Whoa, that's 2 levels above a laser lotus. At 23 I was diagnosed with polycystic ovary syndrome. We were trying to get pregnant and couldn't figure out my very unusual menstruation cycles. We went through the low-level fertility treatments and they didn't work. My insurance doesn't cover any of this so I will not be having babies because I cannot afford the crazy prices for these treatments. It has been kinda hard for me because the only thing I wanted out of life was to be a mother. Recently though I have thought about fostering children. Just have to get out of this apartment and into a house. There are a lot of kids in need of adoption and a good mom like you. I'm one of Victoria's miracle babies. I was born using donor sperm at the Monash IVF clinic. I'm proud that some uni graduates and students made me. Cried a bit. Realized that I could have any type of disease. Cancer. Paternally of course. Most likely means that I can't have babies naturally. It's very odd that I tell Reddit about me being made by some uni students and professors. Andy get 100 upvotes. It's just DNA. Cells were split, but in a petri dish. I'd have red hair if I was made naturally. I like red hair. I say made because hey, conceived is hard to spell with an iPod. My mom apparently cried for hours after she found out that I was going to be a boy after going to her doctor. She had wanted a little girl. I turned out to be gay anyways. Had renal stones at 17 years old. Watch what you eat drink. Pretty much overindulged myself with pearl milk tea during my holiday in Taiwan. Calcifications happen. But that pearl milk tea sure is delicious. If I had to choose between stones and boba, I might just go with the latter. When I was 18, I was told that my dad wasn't my biological father by my aunt. It explained a lot really. I'm taller than both of them and look absolutely nothing like my father. The really cruel part was that while my entire family on my mother's side knew, no one had bothered to tell my dad. In an attempt to rectify the situation, I took it upon myself to tell him. He was devastated and I will never forget the look on his face. He had had a vasectomy before my mother ever got pregnant and always called me his miracle baby. Unfortunately, our relationship never recovered from the news and I haven't spoken to him in almost 5 years. His life and mine were forever changed by me taking it upon myself to tell him the truth. Call me selfish if you will, but if I had it to do over, I would never tell him. I still love my dad and miss him more than words could ever express. So, when I read your story, my first thought was this sounds like the lies they tell to people with androgen insensitivity syndrome. Frequently, people who are genetically male, XY, don't respond the appropriate way to male hormones, androgens, during fetal development, and appear outwardly female. Often the testes do not drop and can in the future become cancerous. Usually in this case, the child is raised female, as this is usually how they feel, but there are surgeries that the child doesn't often understand the reason for. It's highly unlikely for ovarian cancer to be diagnosed without the child complaining of symptoms like abdominal pain or swelling. Did you experience anything strange like that? Not to sound like a crazy person, but there may be more to your story. I lived a very happy childhood. My parents were split up when I was younger but got back together when I was 10. The only thing that was a little weird but never bothered me. But throughout my whole life, I've always found such little things sad. I'm smart and pretty but I just always stressed over the most stupid things. I always thought I was depressed but never believed it and just thought my life actually sucked. In 10th grade, my mom told me that I most likely have depression because it comes from both sides of my family. My dad has it and my grandma had bipolar depression. I was so relieved. I just thought my life was actually sad, but really I just dwell on the little things too much. Throwaway account. My dad told me my mom got an abortion right around the time they met. It wasn't his. Kind of threw me for a loop when he told me. Like I might not have been the oldest kid, or what if she had aborted me. I got over it because I am pro-choice. Still, I did question my pro-choice opinions for a while after. I found out that my dad was not my real dad. I always had a feeling, but still. My mom was with my stepdad and asked him why he wouldn't have sex, and he said that he respected her. They got married and she found out he was impotent. She asked him to get help for it cause she wanted a baby, but he was selfish and would not. It was not a marriage of love but of lying and him emotionally abusing her. So she ended up sleeping with her high school love and got pregnant with me. I honestly don't blame her and I'm not mad. My stepdad claimed to be mine though he knew he couldn't be, and so everyone in my small town still calls me his and I have his last name. He died and we were never close, but I feel he didn't really wanna be my dad. Just didn't wanna look bad in front of everyone ELSE. All these mom had a miscarriage posts are weird to me. It's really not uncommon at all. As high as 1 in 5 in early pregnancy say some statistics. Others say around 15%. I had a miscarriage myself last year. Very early, and expecting my first baby next week. I see no reason to tell him about the miscarriage. How would it benefit him? Kind of shocked as there are a lot of these in the thread and actually change the way a person sees themselves. A few years ago my parents told me that when I was born the doctor who delivered me looked spitting image of Chuck Norris. From that point forward I felt I was destined for greatness. Well, maybe. All I saw in your post was, Doctor Who, Chuck Norris, you are the chosen one. Well, it wasn't me, but a story in my family. When my great-grandma was born, her mother died in labor. Her dad got remarried and she grew up thinking that her stepmom was her real mom. Then when the stock market crashed and her dad killed himself, she needed her birth certificate and went up in the attic to find it, and that's when she learned both her parents were dead. I got told that going way back my Taiwanese aboriginal roots our family were shamans and communicated with souls and such. Made me feel special, and now I can explain why the rest of my family are superstitious crazy Asians. When I was a child, before my parents get divorced, they were always fighting. When I was in my bed, my grandbrother came and asked me if I was okay. Then we talked and he told me, work hard at school, because when you'll finish university, be graduated and live independently, you'll be able to say that you've done that alone, and without the help of your parents. I'm 17 and I still remember what he has said. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.